Okay, hi everyone, thanks for joining. And again, thanks for taking the time out in these strange and interesting times. Today's kind of session is really just a bit of an introduction into one of our partners, a company called Barrier Networks, who have built a kind of managed protect, detect, and kind of response service based around a lot of kind of Cisco kind of security products. I'm just going to take a few minutes here really to kind of set the scene, and then I'm going to hand over to a chap called Ian McGowan. He'll introduce himself and hopefully give you a little bit of a insight to the service itself, the kind of whys and the wherefores, and I guess probably more importantly, the kind of value kind of proposition. So agenda, just me chatting away for a few minutes in terms of setting the scene. Ian, for about 20, 25, maybe 30 minutes, will talk about the service, perhaps try and demonstrate some capability as well. And then I guess more importantly as well, some Q&A towards the end of the session. Certainly leave your Q&A to the end if you want, but at the same time, there's a little Q&A panel in the event centre. And if you wish, you can type in some kind of questions there, and I'll be monitoring kind of that as we kind of go along. So I guess just for me to kind of set the scene, there's obviously kind of massive pressures around, particularly the kind of security kind of those people who have a remit to kind of secure the business, because the business is evolving, right? So a kind of plethora of devices coming out of the woodwork, not just devices owned by human beings, but things attaching to the network, what you might call kind of IoT devices or OT devices. Those TVs on the wall are now kind of network connected. Temperature, kind of controls are usually kind of network attached. Everything's getting attached to the network, so that's a good thing. Obviously, the kind of potential for attack surface just increases kind of exponentially. So security pressures based on that. Loads of customers rushing to the cloud. So there's a kind of transition, a kind of fundamental transition at that level happening. Distributed workforces, that's quite, kind of prophetic, as we all kind of work from home or, kind of various different places. I think it's fair to say that we're not going to be returning to the kind of the new norm is going to be basically a lot more, kind of distributed, flexible, whatever you'd want to call it, kind of working environments. And then the business itself, right? Huge pressures to kind of go through a level of transformation, right? How can technology help deliver, a level of transformation to the business, either kind of through just, simple efficiencies or completely transforming how the business operates. And then kind of pushing against that. So we've got the pressures here on the left-hand side, kind of pushing against that on the right-hand side is, kind of pure security guys like us, having to kind of look after that business, arguably with, too little visibility. There's far too many dark spots around that kind of delivery service, where if you were able to shine a light on kind of certain parts of the network or kind of cloud service, what might you see? Would it be scary? Too little integration. There's a product for every kind of problem, quite frankly, and they tend to come from lots of different vendors. And so, a lot of that integration effort is left to, either yourselves or kind of somebody to kind of integrate. But there is a tax, there's a burden in terms of being able to kind of do that integration. The exposure, as we mentioned before, that kind of attack surface is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger as we add devices, but then also kind of break down what was the traditional perimeter. I think it's fair to say that, back in the good old days when everybody was behind the firewall, the perimeter was quite easy to draw. It ain't easy to draw now. And then lastly, the too few experts piece. This is the big area for me, in that, obviously going to be building tooling and capability to kind of try and get efficiencies to help people buy time back. But at the same time, there is, particularly in the cybersecurity space, a huge deficit of skills and kind of capability. I think the last statistic that I heard was we're about, there's about 2 million open job recs in the industry globally, and if they were to be filled, today, that would just allow us to tread water. That would just allow us to kind of maintain kind of state. But if you think about the change and the kind of acceleration of change, we need to do things differently. We need to think about doing things differently, and we need to be able to kind of leverage skills and expertise wherever we can get them, kind of quite frankly. And kind of lastly, I'm just kind of introducing you to kind of something that we launched over at Cisco Live over the last couple of days, which is the kind of Cisco SecureX kind of platform. And this is Cisco's kind of journey to kind of try and create that simplification. So if you think about products and kind of categories for the kind of security space, Cisco will have products that live in the network, the endpoint, cloud services, and applications. It should be incumbent on us to make sure all of those products are well integrated, and then we provide tooling and capability to allow, different teams to be able to use, that tooling effectively, and at the same time make sure that we build a platform that doesn't operate in isolation, and making sure it's kind of open and inclusive to allow either existing investments to be used, maybe to use products where there are maybe kind of some gaps in the areas that Cisco kind of provide in the security space. Not everybody has a kind of full end-to-end solution kind of yet. So SecureX is a platform that we kind of launched over the last kind of couple of days. And then the idea being also that SecOps, IT Ops, and NetOps teams will gain value from, the SecureX platform. Hopefully, to kind of gain a layer of efficiency. But the issue is, and this is the area of focus when I hand over to Ian, is the teams, the people, the skills, the capability, right? If I kind of mentioned to you before, there's a deficit there. I absolutely believe that pretty much every customer can gain benefit from, creating this kind of collaborative approach to kind of security, being able to have kind of virtual teaming and, using skills and capability, outside the kind of organization. And to that end, the barrier networks manage, protect, detect, and respond service, in my kind of personal opinion, is a great, kind of direction of travel for kind of customers to look at, allow customers to get on with the business that you're there to do, whether it's kind of getting oil, from the North Sea, whether it's kind of bottling ginger in the Central Belt, whether it's, kind of selling insurance, to kind of car owners and things. That's the area of focus for the business. Keeping the lights on, keeping the kind of organization secure, should be a kind of collaborative kind of effort. So to that end, I'm going to shut up now and kind of hand over to Ian, who hopefully can introduce us to the barrier Centri service.
Thanks, Steve.
So I'll pass the ball over to you.
Okie doke.
And you should have the ball now, Ian, so kind of fire away. I think that is 10 past 11, so that was good timing. Thank you.
Right on cue. Okay, so you can see my deck?
Yes, yep, that's coming through fine.
Yeah, okay. Oh, hang on. Little WebEx bubble in the middle of the screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. As Steve said, we work together, Barrier and Cisco. They are a partner of ours. And on today's webinar, I'll be discussing one of Barrier's Centri services, or managed cybersecurity services, and that is Centri for Endpoints. So we built the Centri service to provide our customers with a next generation endpoint protection solution, but specifically with a cybersecurity operational service aspect, which is what Steve was alluding to there, that can augment our customers' IT operations. So providing them with expert level cybersecurity resources which are required when responding to security incidents. So, there we go. So for those of you who don't know who Barrier are, we are a privately and employee-owned business, which means we don't have external pressure from stakeholders, and also that we're all personally invested in what we do. We work in partnership with our clients as a trusted partner for cybersecurity, and we try to work closely with each individual business to try and understand their unique requirements, helping to identify and resolve cyber risk where it may reside. And by building those kind of long-term relationships, we can better understand the businesses that we work with, which means that we are then positioned to deliver a higher quality of service because we understand what they need better. We partner with leading cybersecurity vendors like Cisco to ensure that we are recommending the best technology ultimately. Steve from Cisco is on the webinar, as you know, and that's because our Centri service is built on Cisco technology, and we are a Cisco Advanced Security Architecture partner. So our Centri managed services cater for a number of cybersecurity areas, and they are all delivered from our UK-based Security Operations Centre. But in addition to our Centri services and managed services, or that side of the business, we also provide professional services, which includes everything from project design, implementation and consultancy through to penetration testing and incident response. And we are also a certifying body for the National Cybersecurity Centre, Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus scheme. On a personal note, I've been working in the cybersecurity industry for nearly 20 years, and now spend most of my time at Barrier focusing on delivering security operations for our customer base, and that can range from managing security incidents such as phishing attacks or ransomware infections, right through to designing secure system architectures for industrial control system environments. We work across a fairly wide range of industry verticals, from oil and gas to space, effectively at the moment. So. Okay, so some stats to set the scene on why we do what we do at Barrier. As you can see, the monetary losses that can stem from a successful cyber attack are not insignificant, not to mention the reputational damage that accompanies these. We're also seeing fundamental IT tooling being used to compromise organizations, so PowerShell and email mentioned here, both being heavily abused out there by threat actors. And we are still seeing lots of ransomware out there. We've all heard of WannaCry, which is mentioned up there, but there are plenty more ransomware variants out there with Phobos, Ryuk, Maze, all heavily doing the rounds last year and this year. And unfortunately, a large percentage of those people who are impacted by ransomware are still paying the ransom to recover data. Which I guess before I go any further, if you are affected by ransomware, please do not pay. Call us and we can probably help you. We're often able to recover files by extracting the encryption keys from ransomware out of memory or by some other means. But by folk paying the ransom, they're only encouraging the perpetrators to continue with these types of attacks. So please do not pay. We can help if need be. And then finally, one of the main reasons why we're on this webinar today, the industry average for dwell time is far too high. This number here varies, between vendors and research companies, and it's usually between 100 or 200 days, depending on the research. Whichever end of the spectrum you land on, whether it's 100 days or 200 days, it's still too high. 197 days it says here, but we're seeing that creep down, I think, over time. But anywhere, above a couple of days is far too high. So how do Barrier help? Well, because we specialize and focus on cybersecurity, we're well positioned to assist in a number of areas. I won't walk through all of these on the webinar, but if you do need any assistance in any of these areas, just get in touch and we'll do what we can. But these are technology solutions, and Centri is more about the service. And at Barrier, we've spent a lot of time building out our security operations capability. so that the tooling we deploy is then managed operationally so that it provides the 3 pillars of SecOps: protection against threats such as ransomware, malware, and phishing attacks; detection of threats which have somehow bypassed the controls deployed, and that happens, unfortunately. There are no silver bullets out there. And then lastly, but certainly not least, response. So response to the malicious activity once it begins. Now, some of that will be handled automatically by the technology stack that you deploy, but it's imperative that you have the right skills in your IT department or your own SOC, the right people to ensure that you're taking the necessary steps to detect and respond to those cyber attacks. Security operations such as threat hunting and incident response, these are not skills that you can learn overnight, after you've been breached and you have an unauthorized threat actor in your network. Pivoting, moving laterally, exfiltrating data, spreading ransomware, creating new accounts and enhancing their access, and so on. For security operations, you need expertise so that if the worst case scenario does transpire, and it's not uncommon, you're in a position to respond swiftly and effectively. And, so why is it hard? Well, the threats facing us are becoming increasingly sophisticated and effective. Hackers can now buy tooling online, in the dark net or the dark web, whatever term you want to attach to that. That tooling can automate a large percentage of what they need to do. So back in the day, we used to refer to them as script kiddies. Now it's commercial platforms that they're using to gain access and establish a foothold. And some of these APT groups that we see out there and the threat actors that we see are very good at what they do. So how do we make sure that our operational posture in our security operations centre is prepared to counter these threats? Well, as we migrate to the cloud and we shift towards hybrid architectures that sprawl across data centres and multi-cloud environments, how do we ensure that we retain visibility of threats acting against us? And then, if you've ever worked in a SOC or a security-focused IT department, you'll know that when the board lights up with an alert and you move into that kind of response phase, you don't immediately reach for the phone to call the chief exec so you can let them know that you're under incident. And we don't do that because, unfortunately, security, it's not an exact science. We often experience false positives and false negatives. So we need to be able to identify the real threats and prioritize them accordingly. And to do that, you need the right people looking at your events and alerts. And to do that, you need skilled resource. Tooling will help to an extent, but you cannot replace the Mark 1 eyeball, as I call it, when it comes to looking through your alerts and trying to sort out the noise from the critical information that's in those logs. When we troll through those events and alerts and triage what we find, how do we make sure that once we found a threat, that we can contain and eradicate it swiftly? You can't go around blocking every instance of actor activity that you find. A process that we refer to as playing whack-a-mole, because all you're doing is alerting the hacker that you're onto them. And all they will do is create more diverse C2 or command and control infrastructure and vary the types of C2 beacons that they're using. And then they'll either go quiet so that you can't find them, or they will execute their backup plan and wipe your systems, which we've seen. So you need to use your incident response methodology to ensure that when you do decide to take action, that you've built, a kind of intelligence picture that enables you to cut them out at the root in one swift action, so that you remove all of their access and prevent them from responding to your actions by enhancing what you do between detecting the threat and then responding to it. And like all of that is not hard enough, consider the cost of security and the perception by some stakeholders in the business that it's maybe not providing any benefit unless you're being attacked. So the security threats are increasing rapidly year on year. So it's logical that the defensive measures must react to that increased threat accordingly. So how do we build security operations capability internally in a cost-effective manner, and then retain the staff we've trained without having to worry about being back at square one if key personnel move on? And then lastly, those challenges, to complicate matters further, there is a shortage, as Steve said, of qualified and experienced security resource in our industry. When triaging an incident or briefing a boardroom full of execs or the MD on the actions that you've taken or are recommending, experience helps greatly. So there is a big security gap there in amongst all of those other challenges that we have. So the tooling out there is really good, but the operational capability needs to be there to make sure that the tooling can do what it's supposed to do. So here are some stats that I pinched from a large global SOC that I have worked in, which shows the funneling of data through logs to events to alerts, and then finally down to incidents. So this place was getting somewhere in the region of 130 incidents per day, which is a lot. A lot of that was being handled by automation and orchestration, but at that scale, the triaging at each level of the funnel was completed using a mixture of security tooling, automation, analyst assessment. And although these stats are from a large SOC with a follow the sun kind of always on service model, you can see how the triage process reduces the events and alerts down into a manageable number as they push down the funnel. But it's key to remember that the decisions made in this triage process are critical, because if you or your analysts incorrectly classify alerts, you could end up actually filtering malicious activity and effectively hiding it from your organization. So in a smaller organization that doesn't have the resources to build automation, this is when the SOC staff can suffer from what we refer to as alert fatigue. Okay, so how do we scale our security operations when I've been highlighting how important the people are? Because, you know, as we all know, people are very difficult to scale. So 41% here say that the cybersecurity staff they have are forced to spend a disproportional amount of time on high priority issues and incident response, with limited time spent on planning, strategy or training. 63% say that cybersecurity skills shortages has led to increasing the workload on their existing staff, their IT staff. And then the last stat here from an ISACA report is quite an interesting one. The report data revealed that almost 60% of respondents experienced a phishing attack, and in 30% of those organizations, it was occurring on a daily basis. So how then do we deliver security operations at scale? Well, these are just some of the ways that we can scale our security operations and some of the ways that we've done it at Barrier. So automation, high quality intelligence feeds to support the analyst investigations, investing in your team, obviously, you know, putting the people at the heart of what you do, and then ensure that, you know, all employees across the business have good security awareness so that your first line of defense is as robust as possible. But the challenges that you face in cybersecurity operations are not insignificant, and they can make the process of building a security operations center or, you know, IT department that's focused on security very difficult. It's a big investment to stand up a functioning SOC, because you need skilled resources, you need to build your playbooks, your methodologies, you need to design how you will deliver the service and the technology, and then you need to deploy those technology stacks. And of course, you also need to make sure that you retain the people that you're investing in, because those are key to what you're doing from a service perspective. Okay, so that is why we put managed services at the heart of what we do at Barrier as a cybersecurity business. So affordable, high quality cybersecurity services that augment your in-house IT department with specialist cybersecurity capability. So our Centri services are designed to work with an organization's IT staff to help reduce cyber risk, detect threats, and contain and eradicate threat actor activity where needed. We've always approached the delivery of our managed services as an augmentation to an IT function and not as a replacement. And that's because we recognise the value of local knowledge, essentially, the local knowledge that resides within an IT department. So we aim to collaborate and work together towards a common goal, and that common goal is keeping that organisation secure in a position to protect, detect and respond to cyber attacks. So today's webinar is focused on Centri for endpoints, but the premise of why our managed services are a logical choice for many organizations bears through across our Centri portfolio. Centri for email, for example, helps you to manage your secure email gateway and defend against phishing attacks through things like user training and better response. Centri for SIEM helps organizations deploy and manage their SIEM. SIEM is a notoriously difficult technology that is definitely needed, but is often a wasted investment. And that's due to the ongoing operational overhead being so difficult. We provide a cost-effective way to benefit from a SIEM ultimately in a commercially safe manner. Our Centri for DevSecOps has helped software developers push security controls further left in their software development lifecycle. It's helped them assure their CI/CD, their continuous integration and continuous deployment processes. And it's helped them deploy and manage technologies such as web application firewalls, which can be tricky. But going back to endpoints, why did we choose endpoints as the focus of this webinar? Well, as this slide suggests, and as you may already be aware, and as Steve alluded to right at the start, the legacy perimeter that was once so well defined has now dissolved effectively. Our users are now mobile, and they're operating outside of that traditional perimeter. They're working from multiple locations, but must retain the same levels of connectivity to corporate applications, which might be in the data center or in cloud environments. But at the same time, they must still be subjected to the same security policy, and that policy has to be applied consistently, regardless of where they're operating from. So all of that has to happen while being subjected to an ever-increasing threat environment. So in short, the security perimeter has shrunk or dissolved, and instead of protecting access to your main office, it's now protecting access to your individual endpoints. So we've moved the perimeter right down to the endpoint. So instead of having that one large perimeter, we now have lots and lots, depending on the size of your organization, potentially thousands. So now that we're not bottlenecking all of our traffic like we used to do through a kind of perimeter firewall, where we could inspect it in one place. And we also know that users and endpoints are the #1 target. So whether it's via phishing attacks or drive-by downloads on a compromised web server, ultimately it's the user that they're targeting, it's the user device, it's the laptop or the PC or the server. So it's of the utmost importance that the endpoint security controls that we deploy to the endpoint are effective. We need to be able to protect from threats, but we must also recognize that there's no technology out there that's 100% effective. And in the event that a control is bypassed, we must be in a position to detect that being bypassed so that we can respond swiftly and effectively. And to do that, we must build a comprehensive endpoint security strategy. And, excuse me, in all honesty, from my experience, it's kind of at this point where the focus starts to shift, or in many organizations who do this in-house, this is where the focus starts to shift from a defensive strategy to a focus on technology. And endpoint security will only ever be as effective as the strategy that underpins the design, the build, the maintenance, but also the ongoing operation of it. Because during an endpoint security deployment, if that's not properly thought through, that strategy, it's usually not effective, and it usually results in a poor return on your investment. And ultimately, if you're getting a poor return on your investment from your endpoint security, you're increasing your operational risk to the business. So when we build our endpoint security strategy, we must include the 3 usual pillars that we're all familiar with in IT: people, process, and technology. It really is all about the people, the process, and the technology, and it's in that order and kind of that priority. So let's first look at the service aspect of what Centri provides, which is the people and the process. So we can see here some of the people and process challenges that businesses face when building out their security operations. We've got a shortage of skilled people in the market to hire, as Steve said, and we've got the challenge of recruiting, training, and retaining skilled up employees, and then providing your team with the time to stay on top of the current threats and trends so that they can prepare to defend against the attacks that they are most likely to experience. And that ever-growing attack surface that is becoming increasingly complex due to a mixture of data center, cloud infrastructure, and then couple that with more and more applications sprawling across your environment with access to sensitive data being deployed. And then, chuck in what I mentioned earlier, dealing with that alert fatigue from the ever increasing number of events and alerts that our security tools are producing. So many organizations make the mistake of focusing on the technology first, unfortunately, because, we're going to buy something cool. So, it's kind of natural that we want to go and look at what products are out there. But, they're not considering the operational aspect afterwards, or if at all. And while a good technology deployment can definitely improve your risk posture, ultimately it will usually fail because you will not have the processes in place to deal with incidents or things like maintenance windows. And if the people who are responsible for using the technology aren't given sufficient time to learn how to operate it under normal operations or during an incident, then how can you expect the detection and response aspect to be delivered effectively when it's needed? So the people and the process elements are there to ensure that you maximize the effectiveness of the technology that you invest in. So the cybersecurity industry is booming, right? We all know that. There are more vendors out there than you can shake a stick at. So it can be difficult to choose who you want to deal with. So some of the marketing out there in industry is bold, let's say, to put it one way. So it can be difficult to identify, what is right for you and your organization when there's so many of them, so many vendors out there claiming to be the best, including Steve. At Barrier, we pick tooling, right, based on for our SOC. And when we do that, we strip back to a requirements analysis, essentially. And what you see on this slide is a very high level analysis of our requirements matrix that we put together for endpoint security. And you can probably guess from the Cisco badge that after going through building out a requirements matrix and kind of looking at what we really needed, and what really every business needs, I would say, and comparing what's out there on the market, we ended up going with Cisco. But let me tell you why we ended up with Cisco. So first up, the first piece of the puzzle that we kind of identified, so we broke it down into a bunch of areas, which we'll see in a second. But for the EPP, or the endpoint protection, we wanted something that could defend against what we refer to as known bad, which is what almost all antivirus vendors will do in one form or another. But and we do that using things like signatures, for example. Nothing new there really. But where it gets really tricky is defending against the unknown threats. Okay, so malware variants often use obfuscation or masking to hide what's in the file before it's executed. And threat actors will change pieces of malware so that they don't or they're not flagged by antivirus signatures. So to find the unknown threats with a high degree of accuracy, we knew that we needed something to do the kind of dynamic analysis and runtime analysis, which means malware sandboxing effectively. So performing security analytics at runtime, taking the file, executing it in a safe environment away from your corporate network, so that security analytics can be performed on it, and to check what the file actually does and not what it looks like from a signature perspective. The excuse me, the EDR aspect, the endpoint detection and response, is needed to provide our SOC analysts with a way to, and your SOC analysts or IT department, but we needed a way to provide our SOC analysts with a way to proactively perform analysis across all endpoints to identify suspicious behavior. We needed a way to dynamically assess malware on demand, so that sandboxing function that I mentioned could be used, and we needed a way to respond to threats quickly once they are identified. And they are often identified after the fact. Which is why we focus on this detection phase. So if we detect threats in the SOC, our aim is to isolate them immediately while we triage them, and we do that so that they cannot propagate into the network, as you see with many kind of ransomware variants, such as WannaCry is a good example of that. But we do that quickly, and we do that based on a scoring system as well. So we don't just isolate everything. So we have a scoring system that creates a kind of risk score, and if the alert, if the alert goes above that score, we will then isolate that endpoint immediately. And then immediately we will kick off a triage action so that we can perform some analysis. And when we do that, with the tooling that we have now from Cisco, we typically will have automated the extraction of the file or the malware and sandboxed it, and we will have taken a forensic snapshot of the device at that point of alert, which means that when the analyst gets to that incident in his queue, whether that's out of hours or in hours, he immediately has a report from the sandboxing or the dynamic analysis of the piece of malware, and he also has a forensic snapshot telling you things like what registry keys have been created recently, who was logged into the box, any new accounts that have been created, all that kind of stuff. And then we also wanted a DNS security function so that we could inspect all outgoing traffic at the DNS layer before it makes a TCP or UDP connection. But by implementing controls into the DNS layer, we're able to block threats as they reach out to a command and control server, for example. But we're able to block those threats before they've actually established any kind of connectivity. So integrating threat intelligence into this component provides us with a huge advantage over adversaries because we can intercept the threat early on in the cyber kill chain. And because DNS is global, it was imperative that the system that we picked had a certain level of visibility, a high level of visibility. We need to make sure that whichever vendor we chose was capable of gaining that level of visibility, that kind of big data, and then also capable of doing something with it, analyzing that amount of data. So Cisco, you may or may not know, but they leverage machine learning and artificial intelligence across global DNS data trends. And they're able to do that because they acquired OpenDNS and then have basically enhanced what OpenDNS did previously. So they can look at those data trends and patterns to perform predictive security analysis on DNS traffic. And it's, in all honesty, it's really cool what they do, but probably beyond the scope of this webinar. But if you do want to know more about that stuff, just give me a shout afterwards and we can discuss it. All of that together provides us with a next-gen endpoint security solution that we can deliver quickly from a cloud kind of software as a service-based platform that provides defense against malware, known and unknown alike. And then the other point there at the kind of bottom right, or the bottom of the next-gen box, the API aggregation requirement. That was a key feature that we wanted. Security operations is really difficult and time-consuming. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we went with, it provided the ability to easily reach into multiple technology components within an organization and perform analysis or response activity. And I'm pleased to say, we got that from the Cisco Threat Response tool that's part of our Centri for Endpoint service. Okay, so that was our high-level technology requirements, which led us to, as I'm sure you can guess, Cisco, specifically AMP for Endpoints and Umbrella for the Centri for Endpoints solution. So AMP standing for Advanced Malware Protection. We chose Cisco to build a solution for endpoint security because it extends beyond prevention capability and it addresses the full life cycle, if you like, of the kind of advanced malware problem before, during, and then after an attack. So with AMP for Endpoints and Umbrella, we get the kind of following high-level benefits. For prevention, Cisco AMP uses threat intelligence to strengthen the defenses, and it also helps block known malware with antivirus technology, including that static and that runtime file analysis that I mentioned, the sandboxing aspect to help detect emerging malware where there are no signatures for it. For detection, the AMP platform continuously monitors file and system activity for threats on your devices. And when something new is detected, AMP provides a retrospective alert with the full recorded history of the file back to the point of entry. So, and what that means is that your SOC or your IT security, that the response activity, it's not just dealing with the symptoms of an attack, but you're actually able to kind of stop it at the root cause, dial back the clock, and find out what its point of entry was into your system, so that you can then go and patch or speak to the user or find out or close that gap essentially. And then finally, for response, AMP provides the kind of rich contextual information that's needed during a potential breach investigation, so that you can prioritize remediation and create your response plans, etc. The proposed or the solution really that we provide kind of offers visibility into what's going on, it offers context, it offers control, it allows you to rapidly detect, contain and remediate advanced threats if they do happen to evade your kind of frontline controls or defences. And from that kind of threat response platform, or from what we use in our SOC, we're able to eliminate malware infection within clicks. Now, it's very quick, very it's very fast and efficient. So with this kind of AMP technology stack, you're effectively getting a cost-effective security solution that helps improve your operational efficiency because it all integrates out of the box. Okay, so kind of at a very high level, again, across the top, you can see some of the benefits that we provide as a kind of cybersecurity operations center, a barrier. The box kind of just off center on the right there, the integrated security architecture box, that's then leading down to the kind of bottom level, showing the technology that underpins what our people and processes do. So threat response, we use that for threat hunting, we use that for threat response, funnily enough. We use that for just doing standard queries. If we have an organization, so let's say we have a financial services customer and they have some kind of alert coming in from NCSC saying, here are some hashes of malware that we know, a certain threat actor is using. Please go and check your environment for these hashes and make sure that you don't have these implants on your network. Historically, that kind of stuff was quite difficult because you would have to go and churn through multiple tools and sometimes create scripts that would run and parse through your files and directories. With threat response, we can do that in a few clicks. It's really, really easy. AMP for Endpoints provides us with that kind of endpoint protection and EDR capability. The threat grid sandboxing aspect means that we can automatically pull off files from devices without having to do anything. So if the file's known as good, then great, we don't need to sandbox it. But if a file comes in and we don't know if it's good, we can stick that into the sandbox automatically. And then if it turns out that someone's opened a file that was bad, we can use that retrospective alerting to make sure that immediately that endpoint is isolated and that threat is contained. And of course, next to that is the umbrella DNS, which we use for implementing DNS security aspect. So a little bit about the deployment model, again, fairly high level, beyond the scope to kind of go into what we do in our SOC. But again, if you want to know more, just give me a shout. So we deliver all of our Centri services from our UK-based SOC, which is 27001 compliant. And this enables our customers really to benefit from the effort that we've put into building a SOC and a SOC team and SOC processes. So functions such as SOAR, so security, orchestration, automation and response, where we've spent a lot of time automating the noise out of events and alerts so that analysts are not wasting time on activity that's predictable. If we know that when a certain type of alert fires and a certain type of response has to happen and then a certain type of notification happens and it's all predictable, then we can automate that and orchestrate it so that it takes all of those events and alerts out of the system. It makes sure they are responded to fast and efficiently and properly, but it means it takes that workload off the plate of our analysts, and that means that we're more efficient and we're responding quicker, and we're focusing on what needs our attention and not on the noise. We integrate actionable threat intelligence into our SOC, and that helps our analysts to do things like threat hunting based on kind of an intelligence-led hunt hypothesis. So taking an intelligence-led approach to hunting for threats in your environment means that you're more likely to find the threats that are targeting you instead of this kind of needle in a haystack approach where you're just looking for generic threats. And of course, the response aspect where we're monitoring the environment 24/7 and responding to threats quickly on our customers' behalf. Okay, so for our Centri for Endpoints, in summary, we're helping organizations and our customers to enhance their endpoint protection, detection and response function where they need it most. They're benefiting from a dedicated SOC team with analysts who can perform threat hunting, malware analysis, digital forensics, instant response, and all using market-leading technology. It's cost-effective with no real investment risk on the customer side. so that, and it also allows the kind of business's IT staff to focus on their actual job, because if they usually come to us to outsource their kind of SecOps, it's because their IT people are actually busy doing their normal day job, and if you burden them with the security aspect of what's required, it typically is going to it's going to make the security function probably weaker than it should be, but it's also going to take them away from their day job, which means their productivity is hampered. Okay, so essentially, as I said, your staff are getting to focus on their jobs, and you don't have to worry about your endpoint security because you know the barrier SOC is working with you to help you stay secure and to respond effectively and efficiently to threats. And that's pretty much me, but if you are interested in kind of seeing for yourself what the Centri for Endpoints or any of our Centri services look like, we can provide a free trial so that you can use to assess the platform capability. And quite often when we do deploy the free trial, it actually helps organizations to identify threats in the environment that they weren't aware of. So it's not uncommon for us to immediately assist with an incident that we discover simply by dropping the toolset into your infrastructure. The trials are very easy to provision, they don't involve any downtime or system impact, and they run completely transparently so that you don't have to worry about false positives, for example, that you might typically experience if we were onboarding you, as a SOC customer, because normally when we're onboarding customers for whatever kind of detect and respond solution or service, you do experience false positives, and so what we don't want to happen on our kind of trial is for false positives to block stuff. So everything's done transparently, very easy to land, and it's delivered from a kind of cloud-based SaaS environment. So, Steve, is there anything you want to add onto the back of that?
No, I think you've kind of covered it perfectly. Hopefully, it kind of makes sense. Obviously, Cisco is about building, fantastic technology. We're trying to kind of build platforms and integration, trying to kind of, I suppose, build efficiency to basically kind of buy time back for people. But we can never replace, the skills and capability, particularly in the security space, of, your kind of typical SOC analyst. Ultimately, somebody is going to have to kind of create a verdict, right? And help, I guess, through the response piece. And that's why I was super keen on people knowing about the people part of the business, i.e. barriers, kind of Centri managed kind of service. In other words, the ability to kind of leverage collaboratively the skill set that's kind of an offer there. I think kind of we've overrun quite a wee bit in terms of the QA. Somebody's going to have to invent a virtual stick that you can poke somebody to tell them to kind of hurry up and things, But there was only one real kind of question that probably wasn't answered, and to a certain extent you have answered it, which was how do we get access to this? And I think probably the best way is to either get in touch with myself or the chaps at Barrier. And as I've mentioned, the majority of the tooling and then the service behind it from kind of Barrier it can be deployed as a bit of a proof of value, kind of proof of concept. The kind of technology and their kind of people capability is all there for you to try out in your kind of own environment. So feel free to kind of reach out. At the same time, if there's any questions that have been thought about retrospectively, get in touch. We'll do our best to kind of answer them. And again, my thanks to kind of Ian at Barrier for kind of going through this. I found it kind of interesting. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to mention, kind of Ian, that you've maybe just thought about. But if you haven't, I think we'll kind of call it a day there. And fantastic. I'll share out the recording of this for any of your colleagues who perhaps couldn't make the kind of webinar, but would like to see at least some of the detail around what Ian was talking about. Is that fair? Is that good then? We all good?
Yep. Yeah, nothing more to add from me, Steve. I'm all talked out. Sorry if I ran over a bit. And just thanks
All
to
good.
everyone for dialing in. You know, if you want any more information, reach out to Steve or myself, and we'll help you where we can. And the kind of trials, POVs, POCs, whatever we call it, by all means, we can do that, no problem. They're free. We quite like doing it. We're probably a little bit geeky, and we like doing it because we see the benefits that they bring, you know, to organisations that push them down, which is a really good way for demonstrating the value of the tools. So and the service. So yeah, just give us a shout if you need anything, and thanks again.
Super. Thanks again for your time. Appreciate it. And yeah, until next time.